And thank you once again for tuning in to the Truth, Light, and Life broadcast with Preacher Daniel Rhodes. In this message, Brother Rhodes talks about developing a suitable vocabulary. Many people don't realize that their problem is 1 inch below their nose. The words that they speak, how they say them. Have you ever really taken notice of the words that's coming out of your mouth in your everyday conversation? When you're speaking to people, when you're dealing with people, they are important to the people you're speaking to, and they're important to God as well. So stay tuned for more as Brother Rhodes teaches on this subject.
Oh, glory, hallelujah, I'm a victim of His grace. I'm redeemed by His power, He is now my hiding place. Someday I'm going to heaven and I'll see Him face to face. Oh, glory, hallelujah, I'm a victim of His grace.
Now, this is not a school lesson, and although we have several ex-school teachers in here, I'm not trying to impress anyone that I use the proper vocabulary all the time, but I think it's good for us to learn that we can develop in areas of life. We need to develop. We often do not think of words being quite as important as the Bible makes them, and I'd like to go to the book of James, James chapter 3. And here in the book of James, we have a case of tongue and what it will do. Just because the Bible gives some bad things about certain things, you reverse it. You change whatever needs to be changed. There it says in chapter 3 of James, my brethren, be not many masters, knowing that ye shall receive the greater condemnation. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same as a perfect man is able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be great, so great, and are driven with fierce winds, yet they are turned about with a very small helm, wheresoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defile the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beast and the bird, the serpents and the things that are in the sea, is tamed and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Wherefore bless we God, even the Father, and therefore curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be. Doth a fountain send forth at the same time or same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, neither a vine figs? So can no fountain bring forth salt water and fresh. The tongue sounds like it's incapable of being taken care of, but tonight I'm not going to necessarily be speaking about the tongue as such, but I'm going to be speaking about using the proper words, developing a suitable vocabulary. See, words is not the only thing. Words is how you say them. Makes a lot of difference. The meaning of a word can be interpreted the way it sounds, the tone of voice it's given in. If you have a certain spiritual problem, it usually identifies you by the words. Jesus said, by your words shall you be justified, by your words you'll be condemned. And you've heard the expression, action speaks louder than words. Well, that may be true to a certain extent, but those words are what the Bible says, death and life are in the power of that tongue. It's not always, on your tongue, it's not always what you're saying. If you're saying one thing and meaning another, that's hypocrisy. Jesus rightfully accused the Pharisees, and he said to them, you honor me with your lips, but your heart is far from me. See, he wasn't going by their words, and nor will he look to you what you're saying as much as what you mean by those words. Are they coming from the heart? Words have a tendency to lift others or destroy others. Words can bring comfort and or discouragement, either one. You know, the children of Israel were promised the land of Canaan. They were told that they can go over to the land of Canaan, and there they would live in a land that flows with milk and honey. That simply means all the provision you need, all the good things you need will be provided for you. They was to go over and take the land out of the hands of the enemies of God and possess it. So they went over and they checked it out. And why do you reckon God sent spies over there? He's checking them out. You may be sent on a mission sometime and you didn't know that just to check out, you're going to find out what you're like. So 10 of them went, 12 of them went. And 10 of them had a bad report. The Bible said they gave an evil report. They said, we saw giants, and not only did we see giants, but we were in our eyes, our own sight as grasshoppers. We saw giants and compared us to grasshoppers. Now, this got the people all worked up. Now, here we got all this material we brought here. I mean, the land flows with milk and honey. I mean, it's very productive land. But the people is where we had a problem with the people. We just can't do it. But there was 2 people there that had a different idea because they believed God. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. That made them mad. You mean to tell me that 10 people said that we can't do it and 2 smarties said we can? Who do you guys think you are? Well, God was so impressed, they saw the same thing. They saw the same land. They saw the same people, but they did not see themselves as grasshoppers. And folks, the words that you use can often make you degraded. You can be degraded down to a grasshopper mentality. By thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. Matthew chapter 12, verse 37. And you know the scripture that says thou art snared with the words of thy mouth, thou art taken with the words of thy mouth, has to do with actually signing a note for somebody else. But let me bring you up several points that I want you to note. Number 1 is accuracy in your words and statement. Your statements and your words accurately. You will be known by your words whether your words are good and whether they're not. whether your word can be trusted or whether it cannot. We have an obligation, a responsibility, and a duty to check our vocabulary to see if we are saying the absolute truth. When you're under test, under pressure, are your words always accurate? Jesus, when he was on the earth, everything he did was total honesty. He never had to apologize for anything. He is an honest man the whole way through. Truth came out of him. Truth was what gave a lot of people problems, because here's a man, you could depend on him all the way through and you couldn't depend on some of the others. But exaggeration is pretty much a part of the church world. You go hold a crusade, and somebody says, how many people was there? Well, you begin to guess. And you say, well, you want to be humble. So you say, well, I don't know. I suppose it might be 10,000 there. I don't know. When it was 3,000, you had a pretty good idea. When we were in Togo, I didn't have any idea how many people was there. I didn't know. I didn't know how many people was there. All I know was a lot of people. But the news media, for somehow or the other, the news media counted them. And the news media gave me the figures. So I didn't have to figure about anything. I just quoted the news media. So if they counted wrong, then that was their business. But exaggeration, you can get in a habit of exaggerating things. You can get in a habit of trying to be humble and saying, oh, I'm just such an unworthy character. And all the time you're lying, because deep down inside you think you're pretty great. So what your words, the accuracy of your word, when you say yea, you mean yea. When you say no, you mean no. It is no in between, none. That's the way it is. When you make an agreement, a man that's awkward with his words, or a lady that's awkward with her words, will always be exact with those words. They can remember what was promised. They can remember their promises. And if you have problem forgetting what you promised, then you need to work on that. You need to start developing a suitable vocabulary. That's not suitable for you forgetting. Your tongue has that human nature behind it. But you can get past the human nature by getting spiritual. Spiritual mindedness changes the tone of your voice. It changes the words you use, the accuracy of the word. When you always speak forth exactly what is truth, you make sure that the words you're using are always accurate. You'll find that the Spirit of truth will begin to work with you. And then all of a sudden you find one day you said something wasn't exactly right, and the Spirit of truth will convict you. And you feel terrible about the situation. A person with an honest heart will speak with integrity. He has that in him or her. They just speak that way. You'll find that in most of American advertisements and so forth, you have to be very careful of what you're reading or hearing. They advertise something and they make it very distinctful so that they you can really understand what they're advertising. And then suddenly it's changed to a high-speed, muzzled, so you can't understand what the other is. That means that the person that's advertising has something hidden that he don't want you to know. He's not telling you the whole story. As a car dealer used to advertise, and I said I wouldn't buy a vehicle off of him, because every advertisement had these words that you can't understand. I had a notion to go and ask them what those words meant that you're trying to hide. Let me see them. Let me see what you're saying. And why are you afraid to put them on the air? What are you hiding? See, you may be saying something, you're hiding something. But when you have accuracy of words, you can go anywhere. You don't have to remember what you said. You'll just know. When we started, I remember years ago, a neighbor said to me, what happens to America that she lost her integrity was when we started signing contracts. He said, when I was a youngster, all we ever did was shook hands. I'll buy this property, so much money, we shake hands on it. Everybody remembered what we had. Nobody had to write anything down, we just remembered. Well, now we can't remember hardly anything. We have to have a memorandum about everything. What did you promise? I don't know. I said this, I thought, we agreed to that, I thought, what has ever happened to our vocabulary? What's ever happened to our honesty? The accuracy of words, whatever happened to them? Let me bring you to number 2, accurately quoting another person. I touched on that in Pennsylvania, but accurately quoting somebody. Can you hear what somebody says and accurately quote that person? Can you be dependent on of having accurately quoted someone? When you can accurately quote a person, you know the old thing you used to have, you know, you start somebody here and whisper, and by the time you got to the other side, it was all kind of different things. That's a shame to any human being. We ought to be able to quote things correctly. Do it the same way you would at school. Everybody understood in the first grade that 1 + 1 = 2. Everybody understood that. Everybody knew what we're talking about. Everybody knew that 1 + 1 = 2. But why can't we do that? Another thing, why can't we hear correctly? Why can't we understand what somebody else is saying? Jesus, just about the time he's ready to leave the world, he said to his disciples something that started a rumor. They didn't understand correctly. And somebody said, John's going to stay here till Jesus comes back. And John said he didn't say that. Then went to sing abroad among the brethren that this disciple should not die. Now, that's not what he said. But why couldn't they quote that right? Now, Jesus is getting ready to turn the gospel over to these fellows, and they can't even quote him. We say, well, we're all human beings. I tell you, folks, Jesus was also human, and he could quote people accurately. Well, but we're human. So was Jesus. But we're 100% human. So was Jesus. Yeah. What I'm asking you tonight, Jesus said not to him, he shall not die, but if I tarry till I come, what's that to thee? What's the matter to you? If they'd understood what he said, he didn't say he shall not die, but if I would tarry till I come, I can understand how the problems happen. Well, he said if I want him to tarry till I come, he'd been a pretty old man by this time. He would be very old, in fact, older than Methuselah. And, you know, when you really get to thinking about, those people needed help to get straightened out. The Lord's getting ready to turn them over to a great job. But he's expecting them to quote him properly. When you quote the Word of God, do you quote it correctly? Do you really quote it correctly? Ask yourself the question, how was this statement made? Yours, somebody else's. You're going to get quoting. How did they make that statement? Check it out. Why was the statement made? If I hear someone railing on someone, immediately I'm finished with that person. I don't care what he says. I wouldn't quote him. I wouldn't give him best in it. Brother Mahlon and I were sitting with a preacher, and he began to ask the question, and then he'd come along with that there, you know, I used to do this, yeah. And I clammed up. I'm not talking to him. I'm not spending my time with that. And he wanted to know, well, you can't talk to him. I mean, he just won't say nothing. No, I'm not going to. You start questioning this Bible, and you're not going to have an audience with me. I'm not going to pay attention to you. You see, why is it we can't quote somebody correctly? You need to teach yourself to quote correctly. If you can't do anything else, get your wife to say something and record it. Then you go somewhere and you walk around and go to work or something. Come on, evening. Let me see, what did she say? All right, she said that she'll have supper ready at 6:30. So we checked the thing. It said 6 o'clock. See, I don't know now. Listen, I'm going to step on some toes here, but they will heal. I don't know how many of you ever had what we call Mennonite Amish pastime. That means that you take the clock on the wall and you keep it anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how honest you are, 15 minutes ahead, so you can make it. And everybody knew it's 15 minutes ahead, so we don't have to hurry. We still got another 15 minutes. It's what you call deception. That's the reason people can't quote somebody correctly. Now, they use a series of words that are grammatically correct. You and I are responsible. We've been at school. How many of y'all went past the first grade of school? All right. So you have to learn a little grammar somewhere. And yet, now, you can catch it on me that I've got the same problem. But if I find that I'm using a word incorrectly, I try to correct myself on it. There's a difference between grammatically correct and dialect is not the same. You may have a different dialect. Let's say in England, they say the wine is blowing. The wind is blowing. Well, what in the world's the wind blowing? We call it the wind that's blowing. When we went to the south, we went to Wrightsville, W-R-I-G-H-T, Wrightsville, and they went to Wrightsville. And I used to get them, and they carried their wife to town. We drove ours in. And what I'm saying is, some of those things, once you learn that, doesn't matter. But there's some things that are grammatically correct. We may use the word ain't as just a joking manner or something like that. But there's some things that we need to be grammatically correct with so we know what we're talking about. I mean, it's no use being sloppy with this thing. Come on. We're intelligent beings. We went to school, so let's act like we've been in school. Do you remember how to pronounce these words? I was out of school so much, I had to relearn everything. My one son wanted me to go with him to school one time. They had these classes you go out to, you know, and they said something about verbs. And I thought, what in the world is a verb? And then they talked about a noun, and I thought, let me see now, what's a noun? And my son laughed about it. I said, well, I haven't been in school for a while. I mean, you know. But you see, one of the things, I know what a noun is, know what a verb is. But I had to get that restored. You know what? You can actually begin to work on this thing. Have your wife, if you don't mind her telling you what to do, check her, let her tell you, hey, you're using the wrong words here. This is not, and another thing is pronouncing the word correctly. We can get, it's one thing, I mean, tell you, one of the things I have problems with is hey, I want to do so and so, you know, is that be all okay? Put your hand in your pocket. Don't try to talk to me through fingers. I do not like finger talk. So remember that. Did you ever see people give a testimony like this? Well, I was in town the other day. What the world are you talking about? See, what I'm trying to say, this stuff bothers people. Listen, words can be very powerful, and they can be used wrong. And what you need to do is learn to use those words correctly. A person who is uneducated may use the wrong grammar, but it still can be understood. Wherefore, where is the requirement for continuous ignorance? All right. If I have been using words wrong, I used to write, well, I still do, obviously, but I used to write for magazines and stuff. I had a column in a magazine, I had another column in another, and I was writing a lot, and there was magazines had my articles or something in all the time. And a fella came to see me one time, and he said to me, he said, I can't believe your vocabulary. He said, you write like a PhD and talk like a hillbilly. And, well, you see, and he got me thinking, well, why can't I speak more? You'd hear one of my sermons and try to type it out. It sounded ridiculous. And in the area of dialect, I think that you soon learn, but why not use the right thing? Now, dialect is a different story because some people's going to pronounce things different. I mean, you go to England or you go to some other places, and they just have a complete different thing. When I heard these Pennsylvanians talking German, I wondered where in the world they got that language from. I couldn't understand anything they're saying because their dialect was different than mine. But we soon caught on. And I can even understand MJ back there. You know who MJ is? That's my son-in-law. Now, watch this. Number 4, sincere words have a desirable effect upon the hearer. Here, you can train yourself that when you speak, you have sincere words. You mean what you're saying. You are saying exactly what you mean. It's no obscurity about it. You understand this. When you walk up to somebody and say, I heard you lost your mother, and I'm real sorry to hear that. It's not a form, it's a expression that you heard, I heard. It's a pain goes along with it. And I remember I learned something from my dad. Well, I learned a lot of things from my dad. My dad had a way of doing things that I've seen few people do. I mean, he could walk up to somebody, and after Mother died, there's a fellow that was driving his vehicle and accidentally ran out in front of somebody and killed the man's wife. And my dad and I was traveling together because he couldn't travel. He had to have a chauffeur like I do now. And he said to this man, he said, sir, he said, I'm real sorry to hear you lost your wife. He said, that's really a painful thing. And he said, well, David, you lost your wife too. He said, you know, I lost my wife just natural death, but you lost yours getting killed. He said, there is a difference. And he said, I'm real sorry that happened. And I was listening to my dad as he talked to this fella. And I thought, yeah, see the sincerity of it. When you are speaking, you need to understand, to have a desired effect upon your audience, you need to speak accurately, clear, but not necessarily eloquently. You don't have to speak as an eloquent person or a brilliant mind person to get across something. But when you're preaching, you preachers in here, listen to me, when you're preaching, are you sincerely saying what you mean to say? In other words, when you start something like this, Well, folks, I know we just all make mistakes. We all fail. We all come short of the glory of God. You know, the Bible says we all do. And I know what a problem it is. I mean, I understand that. We've struggled. All of us have our struggles. Go raise dogs. Don't try to preach the gospel. If you can't live what you're preaching, go do something else. You don't hear me say something like that. I'm telling you, this stuff works. I've trained pastors and trained pastors to, now listen, you be an example to these people. And often your tone of voice is going to tell on you anyway. Does that minister grace to the hearer, your tone of voice? When you hear something like this, well, I'll tell you one thing. I know him. Yes, I'll tell you, I've been around him enough. I know what kind of a guy he is. He's not what you think he is. Now, what did that do to you? I moved right over here about, I'm guessing, I don't know, 5 miles away from here, to a house. A preacher told me, he said, you know one that your neighbor? I said, no, I don't know any of the neighbors I'm moving inside of. No, he said, well, I tell you, that one neighbor is the smartest man I've ever seen. He said, I mean, he's an arrogant sort of fellow. You'll find out pretty soon. I said, well, don't tell me about it. I'll find out on my own. I lived beside that man for years and his wife. I never once found arrogancy in him. Never once could I find a complaint about that man. Just an absolute top-notch neighbor. Loved him, he loved us. Now I want to ask you something. What do you think happened between him and that other person? I said something went wrong between those two. Folks, if you have to misquote a person to favor somebody else, or your friend or you, listen, an honest heart does not favor anyone. It just flatly says what the truth is. Using words that challenge, words that enthuse, words that motivate. Some of y'all get motivated by some of the things I say, and you get demotivated by other things I say. But then after you have cried a little, you come back and still love me. You know what? The Bible talks about reprove and rebuke and exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. That's a part of it. But folks, that ought to be a lifting factor. That ought to help you to know that anything other than the best in you won't work. You need to get the best out of you. That's what you need. You have to have the best. Get the best out of you. And that may be rebuking a person. In our ministry, we have a policy there that if you are upset, don't hang around us. Get out of the place. We don't want you to come to work if you're upset, and stay away. When we had a printing business, I said, don't ever answer that phone. If you're upset, go home. Don't touch that phone when you're upset. And nobody answers the phone and said, hello. It's not the way we answer phones. Get some cheer behind you. What you're doing is ministering to somebody, even in business. You know, I had to help to borrow some money for somebody else. And I go to this banker. And he more or less laughed at me for the amount of money that they wanted to borrow. And he let me know he's very busy. And he more or less let us know we're pretty stupid. You know what? He never got a loan from us. Not going to do it. I mean, if you don't have the courtesy to talk to me, if you don't have any courtesy, don't even ask me. I mean, you know, what's wrong with being courteous? If I went over to Brother Jim's store and I said, Brother Jim, I can't find something. I said, y'all put stuff at the dumbest place around here. I mean, why don't you put it out where we can see it? I would be surprised in his position if he'd say, well, stupid, it's right there. I believe he just said, well, here, I'll help you. And he'll go over and show me where it's at. Anything else you need? See, that's a complete different world. But we've got these people. Now here's one of my gripes. Are y'all ready for this one? Would you like to have some tea? Sure. What does that mean? Sure. Is there any other way of saying that besides sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? You know, I hear that in our churches all the time. I don't know who started that. That's not proper. You can say no thank you, or yes ma'am, yes sir, I'd like to have this, or something like this. What's wrong with being a little courteous and polite? Is this anointed of God? Listen, you're going to be talking to God too. You need to talk to Him right. You don't gripe to Him. You don't complain to Him. You say, Lord, I want to thank you so much for the manna that came out of heaven and all that, bringing the water out of the rock and all. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking good care of us. But I've just been thinking about barbecue quail. Do you think we could have some barbecued quail? And they had meat to eat, but they didn't enjoy it. You're not going to enjoy much the Heavenly Father gives you if you gripe about it. If you get it through grump and hump, you won't enjoy it. Now, let me remind you something else. Number 5 is voice your opinion softly. We decided to buy chairs for in this building. And what color are we going to get? I happened to be the pastor at that time, and I said, what does it make any difference? What color? I mean, go on and get the chairs. Well, you know, we maybe ought to have this and this and this and that. You can go to a whole lot of problem with that thing. But we got chairs in here. And then we wondered how we decided to buy the chairs, but we didn't know how to get them paid for. And I said, no problem, just let the Lord pay for them. And y'all know that somebody called the wifey and said, are y'all buying chairs for the church up there? We're thinking about it. Yeah, how much money you need? She gave him the figure. She said, I'll be up with the money shortly. How you like that? All right, now, he comes in and pays for the thing. Now, I'll get back to this discussion of opinion and softly in a moment. But you know, if you just say thank you. No, not for all these chairs. You don't say thank you. Appreciate it. It's more than that, folks. You need to express some gratitude. I just want to thank you so much for that. I know it cost you that, and I really appreciate it. And I mean, you can tell the tone of voice, you really mean it. It's not this old half-witted thank you. It's getting grateful today. Now, when you start acting like this, you'll offer your opinion softly. Well, I was really thinking it would probably be best to have maroon chairs instead of blue ones. You know, I mean, I just kind of favor that. Well, what's wrong with that? You know what? We learn in our church not to put everything up for a vote. Just go do it. And, you know, when this church was built, the ladies, there's certain ladies, sisters appointed to check on the color of the paint that was going to be on this wall. when they said something about a pink tent, somehow I got a pink building out of this thing. Now, I'm trying to say, I said, look, I like pink. That's my favorite color probably. But I don't know if I want it inside a church. And so they showed me what they call pink. Well, when I grew up, this is not pink. You know, a pink tent. Isn't that right? Who was on that committee? Was it a pink tent? Did Nick say it was a pink tent to this thing? Well, anyway, whatever happened, I don't see any pink in it as such. But I voiced my opinion softly because that's the way you need to do it. I mean, after all, what's the use fighting about this thing? I was at a church one time and I said, you know, there's a church around here somewhere that they told me that people got in an argument, and one thought you faced the church this way, the other thought you faced the church this way, and they got in such a bitter, heated discussion that the one went down the road and built the church, and the other one built another church over here. So they all faced them in different way or whatever. The church guy said, well, I'm the one that built this church, faced the opposite direction. And I said, so this is the guy. Yeah. I said, now what in the world was all this about? Well, he said, common sense teaches you. You don't put a church in that direction. So the other fellows don't have common sense, you see. Now, if you went to either one of those churches, you didn't know which one had the common sense and which one didn't. You see, you can get emotionally involved in something. I mean, you can get really emotionally involved. Well, I'll tell you right now, I mean, this is going to look stupid. Years ago, I was on a board, which we're supposed to make decisions. This one fellow on this board, he beat all I ever say. He'd go like this, well, now, if we use this, this would probably last a little longer than this. If we did this, it'd probably be a little more expensive, but it would, and oh man, by the time he got done with all that sophisticated talking, I wanted to voice my opinion loud and clear. But common sense and the Heavenly Father says, keep quiet. So you can learn to shut your mouth. You can. Or better still do like Jesus did. He said it nicer than I do. He said, peace be still. Or he said, hold thy peace. See, when you're answering a critic, you don't have to take and get mad at him. Let him go and blow his top. When he gets done, just walk away from him. I had a fella out in Montana came up to me and he said, now, Brother Rhodes, I just want to talk to you about some things. Your church believes this, and I want to know why you believe this, and yeah, you know. And he talked, and I just sat there and looked at him. When he got done, I walked away. Fellow met me in Pennsylvania one time, all this stuff. Now, Brother Rhodes, you're a grace man. You don't believe in grace. You believe in works. You only believe in, we got to have good works to get to heaven. We're grace people. We believe that you can live any way you want to, I mean, within reason, but the grace of God takes care of it. I never said a word to him, and I suppose, he's one of the witnesses, I suppose he talked to me for a solid hour, a boring message. I never answered. But we sure had an audience. I know a preacher that couldn't get anybody to come to church to listen to him preach. He's trying to hold around a meeting, nobody could come. So he said, all right, I'm going out on the streets. He got himself a PA system, went out on the streets, and he turned that thing up so people would come, hey! You know, and so on. Here come the sheriff, the deputy sheriff, said, cut that blankety thing down, you're disturbing the city. He said, I've come here to preach the gospel, and that's what I'm going to do. And he went over to pull the wire out of the speaker, and he said the thing was, everybody could hear me, but couldn't hear him, because I'm answering him on the speaker. And I said, you touch that PA system and God will kill you. And he said, boy, that fella got out of there in a hurry. And years later, this fellow's in the hospital dying. And he went in, he said, listen, sharp, it's time you get saved. Said, I know it. And he said, I led him to Christ. He said, you remember that time down there when I was going to pull that cord out and make you stop preaching? He said, yeah, I remember it. He said, well, God was somewhere around there that night. Scared me. So, I guess there's a place, if the Lord of heaven gets you to express your opinion, I reckon that may be all right. But be sure the Lord's behind it. Now, select your words carefully. Have you ever thought about when you go to pray that you select the right words to say? Write down the words. Actually, write down words that have a special meaning to them. You say, well, now that's silly. It doesn't make any difference. It is silly. You'll learn to say the right thing. If you go up to the Lord and say, well, dear Lord, we're going to need, now today what they do is say, Father God, or dear Lord, or something, and it's said 25, 30, or 40 times in the prayer. And that turns Heavenly Father off. You ought to check yourself out sometime. See what you're saying, all those unnecessary words. You're not going to get very far with God on that. Well, this is the way I pray. I tell you, you can stop praying like that. Start using words. Pleasant words are honeycomb. Sweet to the soul, marrow to bone, says Proverbs 60. You can select the right words. You just simply write down how you want to talk to that. If you was to go to apply, you want to go to the city and investigate about doing something or building something, which we right here had to work with some things on the building code, and they was giving us a hassle. You can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. And everything they said we can't do, we did every one of them. See, use some words. Select your words carefully. It's proper for you to use proper words. You know, just I was a real good friend of a judge years ago in Georgia, and we were friends. But never, never did you hear me ever say to him just regular language. He's a judge. While we were friends, he was out at our house, and I said to him, you know, Your Honor, sure, it's all right to respect him. That's okay. Well, we've forgotten that. You address people by Mr. somebody if you don't know them now, you know. But we Christians need to get back and find the suitable words to say things in prayer when you're talking to the Heavenly Father. I tell you what, there is a way of praying that sounds different than just, dear Lord, I just pray that you would bless the missionaries today, bless Uncle Sam and Aunt Sarah, and bless this and bless that, and bless this and bless that, and do this and do that and another. When you get finished, what did you say? Get some words together. I was in Iowa, and an evangelist, a missionary just come back from a mission, his mission field. I didn't know him. It's a stranger to me. I didn't know who's in the audience, but I said, folks, when you're praying for a missionary, don't just go on that so haphazard way. Say something. Dear Lord, so-and-so and his wife are going to be moving into this mission field. And Lord, they're going to be facing things that most of us don't think much about, such as loneliness maybe. They had to leave their friends behind. And I'm asking you to fill the vacancy there. When they feel that loneliness, especially the children that's involved, they don't have their friends no more. And Lord, I understand there's a lot of snakes in that area, poisons. I'm asking you to protect them from them and the mosquitoes that carry malaria and all this. I'm asking for a hedge of protection about them. And that water that they're going to drink probably will have contamination in it, and I'm asking you, Lord, to protect them. That guy almost jumped off of his seat in the back. He was sitting about halfway back, and he jumped up and said, Brother Rhodes, I wish you'd have been around when I was on the mission field. He said, I've never heard anybody ever pray like that. All it was just, Lord, bless so-and-so and his wife, and bless her. What's wrong with that? You're in school tonight. I'm trying to teach you how to do this thing right. You select words correctly and eliminate slang and suggestive statements and improper jokes. I mean, a joke ought to be, even if you do give a joke, it ought to be honest. You know, it ought to be an honest joke, not just something haphazard. Of course, a joke generally is funny because it's got some meaning behind it, but you make sure you're not lying. I just told somebody the other day, I said there's a woman that had a lot of trouble with her husband, and she was putting up with this and putting up with this, and finally one day she had all she could take, committed suicide, and she wouldn't live with him anymore. So, now that's true. Absolutely true. Y'all don't even catch on. I don't think you know what I'm talking about. You know, that thing of selecting your words carefully, you know, a bunch of slang. I'll tell you what, there's somebody stepped in behind this pulpit one time, and a visitor, and went like this, by golly, folks, wait a little, hold it. You're in a church that don't use that kind of language around here. Let's calm this thing down here. We don't use that kind of stuff. There is a proper way of using words. Not some of this careless, unconcerned stuff. There's also silence is better than response when you are being accused. When an accuser starts on you, it's just good to just keep yourself quiet. It's Peter said in 2:22, 1 Peter 2:22 says about Jesus, who did no sin, neither was God found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he reviled not again. He didn't answer. When he was reviled, he reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judges rightfully. You know what? We need to do that. We need to understand that. You don't have to answer these critics. I mean, I'm not going to talk to them. That's just the way it is. I stood, or sit rather, with some preachers that was mad at me about the truth. They didn't like that I considered myself a prophet and all this, and they didn't like it. And they was telling me and chopping me up, and I'm not saying anything. Started accusing me. I'm not saying that's not right, it's not true, you don't understand. Let them go. Let the Lord take care of it. And the situation was, I never did answer him. I'm not answering. The Lord answered for me. The Lord did the answering. That's what makes a difference. If you learn to keep still, he was led as a sheep to the slaughter, and like a lamb dumb before his shearer, so it not his mouth. It's talking about Jesus, Acts 8:32. He wouldn't talk. Let him accuse you. Let him go ahead. Use terminology that can be understood. Did you ever think about that? Using terminology that you can understand? I mean, some of these preachers I hear, I can't even understand what they're saying. If if you can't understand all the big words and everything, if you're going to use big words, at least explain what they are if you got an audience that don't understand. You need to understand that when they can understand your terminology, there are certain things that there at the office I'll say something and somebody say, I'm not familiar with that word. Well, all right, let's get familiar with it. Here's the way we do it. Learn to communicate with the audience properly. You know, this is real important. And is just communicating with them properly. Let them know what you're saying. And I'm going to add number 10 here, elevate your opinion of others. You know what, folks? When you begin to elevate your opinion of somebody else, you'll see them in a complete different light. Let not the hand say to the foot, I don't need you, or the eye, I don't need you. We need every part of our body. Cut your little toe off, you're going to suffer. And that's the thing, folks, when you are communicating with an audience and they realize that you understand what you're doing, you understand them, you are trying to address something they need to hear, but you learn to elevate these people. You're not a dummy. You're not somebody way off somewhere. Once we learn to elevate people around about us, it'll help us. We'll be able to understand each other better. We learn to love each other more because we've learned to elevate them and learn to begin to show them respect and all that goes along with it. It's just real important that we learn to elevate our fellow man, and instead of elevating ourselves, let's elevate them. Begin to show them that they're important to us. They really mean something to us.
Land of the bliss, all sorrow shall cease, for all will be peace in the land that's far better than this. I'm homesick for heaven, where loved ones have gone, who are safe in His wonderful care. If we could but hear from our loved ones so dear, they all say